Hello and welcome to the channel. So today I'm going to start on a fun little project. I have a nephew who just turned 6 years old. I'm going to make him a slingshot similar to this one that I made my daughter about 9 years ago from a tree branch that I found here on the property. Now this was a pretty simple and low-cost project that just about anyone can do. And you know, you may find some enjoyment out of making something yourself instead of just buying another cheap plastic toy. Now, if you're planning to do this yourself, I wouldn't be too concerned about the tree species you use for the wood. This one happens to be Douglas fir because that's what I had on hand at the time. It just needs to be stiff and strong enough to be able to withstand this pulling action. But the diameter of the forks is an important consideration for me. That's because I'm going to be using this round latex rubber tubing. I'm going to be using the tubing because I found that it's stronger and it by far outlasts the flat rubber bands that you sometimes find on slingshots. Now this particular tubing happens to be 9 millimeters in outside diameter, and I was measuring the fork size on this slingshot here, and 16 millimeters is about as small as I'd want to go on the fork diameter to accommodate this particular tubing. Now if you're planning to paint, stain, or seal your wood, then moisture content is another important consideration. If you're starting with a freshly cut green piece of wood, I recommend removing the bark and any excess material and then putting your piece aside in order to air dry. That way you're less likely to get bugs in the wood, the wood's going to dry faster, and green wood's just easier to work with. Now in order to air dry, you're going to want some shelter from the rain and plenty of airflow, and the general rule of thumb is to allow 1 year of drying time for every inch of thickness. Now if you've found a dead branch that looks like it may be suitable, but you're not sure if the wood on the inside is dry enough, there are a few indicators you can look out for. For example, if the bark on the outside has started to fall off, that's one indication that the inside wood is dry. Also, you can pull on a stick on the side of the branch, and if it snaps off cleanly like that instead of bending, that's another good indicator that the wood on the inside may be dry. Now there's a more scientific way to measure the moisture content of wood. I'll show you that just a little later because I have a nice straight piece that I cut last year that's been drying, and I want to remove some of the outer material first because I didn't take my own advice by debarking it before letting it dry, and I'm not certain that it's dry enough just yet. Okay, so my wood piece here is larger in every dimension than it needs to be. This is actually a pretty good thickness for an adult size hand, but this is meant for a child, so it needs to be thinned out. And I brought my digital calipers here just to make sure that I don't go below the 16 millimeters minimum on the forks. Now it's also a bit too long, and I'll take care of that later. So for this video, making the slingshot here, this is a pretty small project, and I should be able to use nothing but cheap hand tools that everyone should probably have already or can acquire without spending a lot of money. Okay, well I don't have any particular technique in mind. I'm just going to start shaving wood until it's the right size. Now I've run into a knot here. You can use a batoning technique. So if you put your knife here and just really gently with a stick or something, just kind of tap it down, and just like that, the knot is gone. You want to do it gently so that you don't crack the wood. Also, if you're cutting off knots, you want to take note of the angle of the knot if there is one, and you want to be cutting with the angle of the knot and not against the angle of the knot. And what I mean by that is, let's say for example, your knot is angled up like this. If you come down with the knife and cut against that angle, you're more likely going to tear out the wood than if you were to just turn it upside down and cut downward. Now this should be obvious, but you don't want to attempt this with a dull knife, especially if your wood is already dry and fairly hard. Now I spent a lot of time last night sharpening my knives so that they're crazy sharp, and before you do any kind of woodworking like this, the knife blade should be able to slice through paper rather easily. If it can do that, then you should be able to cut through wood rather easily as well. But even so, it's going to take a bit of effort, and I've gone ahead and switched to gloves because my hands were starting to hurt just a bit. And this helps me to put more pressure and take off more wood quicker. Well, that really didn't take very long at all. This Mora cut through this wood rather quickly, and it took less time than I expected. Now, measuring about 18 millimeters on each of the three portions here, and I'm going to stop there. I think this is pretty good for a small hand, and it'll still be large enough to add some strength when I put the latex tubing in later. Now, before I go to the next step, or before doing any sanding, I'm just going to knock off the sharper edges with this little open L knife. It'll just make the sanding process go a little bit quicker later. It's also small enough to get down into this crook, so I can more easily kind of even this out a bit. Now, on this step, you just want to use really, really light strokes here. You're not trying to remove wood anymore, just kind of smoothing it out. Okay, so I think we're ready for the next step. This is nice and smooth in the hand. Feels really good. In case you were wondering, the wood that I'm working with today came from a vine maple tree, which looks like this here. It's a very flexible tree, and the wood is fairly soft, which makes it easy to work with, and it creates a lot of these Y-shaped branches. The only downside is it holds a lot of water and takes a really long time to dry. Now, before I get any further and do any finishing work, I want to verify the moisture content of this wood. Now, I already did an initial check before I started the project, but I was probing the outside wood, which has now been removed, so I just want to verify and take another measurement of the inside wood here. Now, this step is an optional step, especially if you've been keeping track of how long the wood's been drying and you're reasonably certain that it's dry. But I know from experience that this species takes a long time to dry because I occasionally burn the wood in my wood stove. So it's better to be safe than sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and take another measurement. And the general rule of thumb is you want your moisture content to be below 12%. And to check that, I'm going to be using this moisture tester. This is something I bought off of Amazon. It was not very expensive. And I'm measuring 11.7%, which is just below the limit. Okay, so I'm going to cut it where I've made these three marks here. And just for reference, the handle will be just about 5 inches long. And then each fork will be about 3.5 inches long. Now, in keeping with the common hand tool motif of this video, instead of using the saw behind me here, I'm just going to be using a hacksaw to cut the ends of this slingshot off. Okay, so next I'm going to bevel the edges of each of the three ends that I just cut. And basically that just means I'm going to round off that 90-degree edge. And the reason you might want to do that is a 90-degree bend is oftentimes a weak spot in the wood that helps to propagate cracks and splits. So by rounding that off, you help to strengthen the wood, but also it just feels better in the hand. If you grab the slingshot by the end, you don't have that sharp edge poking you in the hand. So normally I do this on the belt sander and it would literally take me seconds. But in this case, I'm going to use hand tools. And you might want to use a rasp or a file like this one, or even a knife. You can cut off the edges. I've done that before and it works fine. But today I'm going to try out just using sandpaper. This is some heavy-duty 80 grit sandpaper. Okay, I don't know how well it comes across on camera, but I'm done with the bevels and I'm pretty happy with the results. These are all nice and smooth. I no longer have that sharp 90-degree bend. It feels pretty good in the hand. Okay, so next I'm going to be drilling holes into each of the forks in order to insert the latex tubing. And I've done my best to mark the center of each fork and try to make sure that the holes are level so that one's not higher or lower than the other. And I guess it would be easier to drill a straight hole using my drill press behind me here. But today I'm just going to be using the standard old hand drill that most people will have. So I'm going to have to be really careful in trying to make a straight hole. Now ultimately the hole is going to be roughly this size here, but if I were to use that larger drill bit and just drill straight through, it's very likely that the wood would tear out as the drill bit goes through the bottom side. So to prevent that, what I'm going to do instead is I'll start with this really small drill bit, and I'll drill down and I'll try to stop the drill bit before it pokes out the other side. But if I don't, it'll just have minor tearing at the most. And then I'll flip the piece over and I'll drill down again just to make sure the hole is wide enough. And so I'll be drilling from both sides essentially. And then I'll step up the drill bit to a larger bit and continue to do that, drilling from each side until I get to the full-size hole. And in that way, I'll have a nice straight hole and I won't have any tear out, or at least that's the plan. Now, because this piece is approximately round, I went ahead and poked a very small hole just by hand using a small drill bit, just so that my bit isn't sliding around as I'm trying to drill in. Okay, so it's just poking out there. I don't know if you can see that. So I'll just turn it over, make sure that my hole's going all the way through from both sides. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. It's roughly center. That's my biggest concern, is trying to hold the drill bit level so that, or straight up and down, so that it comes out the center. And yeah, this is looking pretty good. Let me try the other side. Okay, I think that's going to work. I'm going to go ahead and grab a larger drill bit and widen the holes. Now the latex tubing that I'm going to be using is rather strong, but it's not exactly tear resistant. So I've just been using this little round file here to kind of clean up the holes that I just drilled and make sure it's smooth in there and that there's nothing that's going to snag on the tubing and cause it to tear. But also the holes after drilling, it's going to leave an abrupt edge all around the hole. And just like I beveled the ends of the slingshot, I'm going to go ahead and bevel the edges of the hole, again, just to make sure that it doesn't cut into the tubing and cause it to tear. Now, normally I would use something like this. This is a step bit. This would be a real quick fix. And this is a little cone I think I bought off of Amazon. It's basically just sandpaper, and that would probably work as well. It attaches to a drill. But since I already had this little file out, I've just been kind of working around the edge of the hole, and that's actually working pretty nicely. It's a little slow going, but this is pretty soft wood, so it's not as slow as you might think. And since this is working, I'm just going to continue on using this, and I'll go ahead and clean up the other hole as well. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and start hand sanding. I have some 150 grit sandpaper, so I'm going to start with it, and then I'll work my way down in grit size or up in numbers until it's nice and smooth in the hand and I don't have any sharp edges or any scratches. Okay, well, I actually had to pull out some 80 grit sandpaper for one of the particularly rough sections. I went all the way down to 400, and it's nice and smooth now. I think it looks great. It feels great as well. And you can tell when you're using cheap imported sandpaper, because you're left with a bunch of tore up paper at the end there. So anyway, I think we're on to the next step. Okay, so next I want to try a finishing step, which I've never actually done on a project before, but we're going to try it out today. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and let that cool off, and then I'll stain it. Never turn down a free chopstick at the Chinese restaurant. They have many uses. In case you're wondering, I'm going to be using Min Wax Sedona Red number 222. This is one of my favorite colors. I use this pretty often for projects, usually for myself. And because this is a very small project here, I can just use this little brush. And I'm not going to be painting up here in the burn sections. I'm just going to be painting the bare wood. I will blend it in just a little bit though. Okay, so I'm going to let this sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, and I'll wipe off the excess. Okay, well, it's the next day, and I ended up applying 3 coats in all of that red stain to the slingshot last night before allowing it to dry overnight. And I think it turned out really great. I think that looks nice. It's a bit light in color, but if you wanted a deeper, darker red, you could just apply more coats. But I like the light color because you can see the grain, the wood grain underneath, and to me it gives it more of a handmade look, which is what I was going for. So I'm going to call the staining portion of this done and go on to the next step. Okay, so next I'm going to be adding a clear sealant, and I've worked with a lot of different sealants over the years, but today I'll be working with one of my favorites. This is shellac, and I think shellac makes a great option in this case because first of all, once it dries, it doesn't dry quite as hard as some of the other sealants, and that just makes it feel nice in the hand. It's also a completely natural sealant, and it's non-toxic, and this is going to be a kid's toy. Now, the only downside in my mind of shellac is the fact that it's not very resistant to a lot of solvents, so you don't want to clean this with rubbing alcohol or something like that. Now, before I coat the entire slingshot, I'm going to apply a little bit of the shellac inside the holes here and allow it to dry. And that way, after I coat the rest, I can hang this up by a string and it can just dry that way. Now, the fact that shellac is dissolvable in fairly mild solvents is actually a benefit for the user because I'm just a few inches from the jar here and I'm not getting that overwhelming smell of highly volatile chemicals like I would normally get with a lacquer or some of the other sealants. Okay, so it's been about 2 hours and the first coat of shellac is already dry to the touch. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a very light sanding. This is 1000 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to give it a really light sanding here, and then I'll follow this up with a second coat. And this is basically just to level out that first coat, so the second coat will go on nice and smoothly. Okay, so I put 2 coats of shellac on last night and let it dry overnight. So it's completely dry now. Let's take a look and see what we got. Okay, I'm really happy with this. I think it turned out really nicely. I think adding that clear coat really makes the colors come out and just adds some depth to it. Of course, it also feels nice in the hand and protects the wood as well. Now, 2 coats I think is going to be enough. I think that we have really good coverage here. I mean, I could put another coat on, but I don't think it's necessary. I think we're going to stop here. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I think it's time to go on to the next step. Okay, so next I need to make this little pouch, the portion which holds on to the rock or whatever ammunition you're firing out of your slingshot. Now, originally I used an old leather work glove which was wore out, and I just cut a patch out of the back, and that worked out really well. It's about the right thickness, it's malleable, yet durable, and it's held up really well. In this case, this is my daughter's, but she's outgrown it now, so I'm going to use this to make a new pouch. Now, in the original design, I doubled up the ends of the pouch. I have it folded over here just to help to strengthen it a bit. And I have these holes cut. They're pretty large holes, but you have to accommodate the tube. The tube has to go all the way through there and then come back on itself. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to go ahead and cut slits for the tube. And then I think I'm going to, on the new one, I'll glue down the end piece here, this piece here. I'll glue it down so that it doesn't come unraveled, because I noticed the pouch on this side here has come unraveled. Okay, I got the holes cut out. As you can see, this leather is really tough to cut even with a razor knife. At any rate, I'm going to go ahead and fold over the ends and glue them shut. And I'm going to be using this. This is a Gorilla Maximum Strength Construction Adhesive. Okay, got the ends clamped down, so I'm just going to go ahead and set this aside, let it dry overnight, and we'll see what we have tomorrow. Okay, so the glue is dried on the pouch, and I think this is going to work out pretty well. Now, for the next step, I'm going to attach this pouch to the slingshot, just the way this one is attached. So for that, you're going to need some of the latex tubing. I cut off a 12-inch piece here, which is going to be a bit too long, but I'll cut off the excess later. And then you'll need some heat shrink tubing, or at least that's how I have mine attached. It needs to be large enough to accommodate the tube bent over on itself like this. And then some zip ties. These are just standard 4-inch small plastic zip ties. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a piece of the heat shrink tubing onto the tube, the latex tube. Then I'm going to feed it into the pouch like this. And then I'll double it over like this and squeeze it in to the heat shrink tube. Now the heat shrink tube piece is about 3/4 of an inch long, but it's going to shrink up in just a moment because I'm going to hit it with the heat gun. So this is just your standard heat gun. If you don't have a heat gun, you can use a hair dryer, and that'll work as well. It just will take a little longer is all. And I'm just going to use it on the lowest setting because you don't need a lot of heat for this. Now the heat shrink tubing is just there to basically serve as a protective layer for the latex so that it can be bound up by these zip ties here. And I should mention that the latex tube starts on the inside of the pouch and it terminates on the outside. So it looks like this. This is going to be the inside of the pouch. And then I'm going to go ahead and get the zip tie on. And on the original design, I just used one zip tie and I used less heat shrink tubing, but this is going to be for a little bit larger kid, and I'm going to go ahead and double this up. So I'm going to put 2 zip ties, and the heat shrink tubing is going to be a little bit larger than what I originally used. Okay, that's pretty tight there. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the zip ties. Okay, now I just need to cut off the excess tubing here. Okay, so that's one side done. I'm just going to repeat for the other side. Okay, I have tubing attached to both sides of the pouch now. So all I need to do is put the tubing inside the holes. And so based on the original design, from the pouch to the hole is about 5.5 inches, and I think this worked out well, so I'm going to duplicate that on this one. Okay, so the next step is really simple. I just need to tie off the tubes. And I'm just going to use a standard knot just around and through the hole. And the harder you pull on this, the harder the knot tightens. So it's not going to come out. This one hasn't come out in 9 years, so I know this works. Okay, so before I commit to cutting off the excess here, I'm going to give it a few practice shots and see how it works out. By the way, pea gravel works as a really good ammunition for these little slingshots. So this is working pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the ends of the tubes here. And I'm going to set up some cans and we'll see just how accurate this guy is. Okay, well, the handmade slingshot project is officially done, and I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. I think it looks great, it shoots straight, and it was fun to play with and fun to build as well. This was not a very expensive project. It just took a little bit of time and effort. I think it was definitely a worthwhile entry-level kind of a project, and I hope that my nephew enjoys playing with it as much as I have. So that's about all I have for this video. I hope this was informative or useful in some way, and we'll see you next time.